So, Prey 2 has been cancelled. This is confirmed by Bethesda, and so Prey 2 is no longer in the upcoming release expectations because this game has officially been cancelled. They are no longer moving forward with this project, and it's rather unfortunate because, well, Prey 2, there is an audience for that, and people are looking for something a little bit different in the first-person shooter genre, especially for the current generation. You know, something that's a little bit more interesting than some of these other choices we have, these typical shooters that we have become so familiarized with. And the thing, too, with Prey, the Prey brand, it's been around for such a long time, and, I mean, even going back to the original Prey, the first Prey, give a little history lesson, came out, what, in 2006, when it was finally released. And before that, it was in development hell since the mid-90s. I mean, that project has been around since the days of the Next Generation WWF, ever since the days of Bret Hart and Diesel and Shawn Michaels when they were the faces of professional wrestling. Back when, you know, WCW was around and ECW and the mid-90s was rocking to the fullest. Prey was actually in development, and it was a project that was set to be released in, you know, the future. It was one of those lineups of, I mean, and then it was in development hell for the longest time, and there was so many false starts with that project. They just couldn't get it right. It was always something missing. There was always something wrong. And then ultimately it finally dropped in 2006. I mean, 2000, that was a long time ago too. That's 8+ years ago. In mid-06, came out on the Xbox 360 and the PC. And when it finally came out, Prey was actually fairly well received. And it was actually a decent shooter. I haven't played it in a long time, but it's one of those games that tend to be forgotten about too. I mean, I know I tend to kind of miss talking about it. I never really talk about it too much when I mention the first year of the Xbox 360. It's one of those games in the first year lifespan, when the first 360 came out in late 2005, and then that initial first year, Prey was definitely one of those titles. It was definitely probably the most interesting first-person shooter to come out on the 360 at that time, you know, in that first lifespan, first year of the Xbox 360's release. So, probably one of the more under-talked about games, if that even makes sense. You know, people don't talk about it as much anymore. And it was also notable for having this Native American character. I think there was a Cherokee main character in there, and his storyline, and, you know, his girlfriend was captured by aliens, and he's got to rescue her, and he's battling these weird aliens from outer space, and he's got to fight them in their ship. And I never got too far with that game, though. You know, I never rescued the fucking girl because I couldn't beat the game, and I don't know, it was one of those games where I started it, got, you know, a good portion of it done, and then just somewhere along the line I just stopped playing it and moved on to another game. Kind of like a lot of these, 90s style shooter, because that's what Prey was. I mean, Prey was basically a corridor type of shooter. It was a very 90s feel to it, you know, a very 90s type of FPS, similar to like a Doom, or maybe even a Duke Nukem or something like that. And now, okay, so we got the sequel, Prey 2, which was essentially, the franchise was bought, okay, by Bethesda and ZeniMax Media. And so the rights to Prey was now owned by Bethesda Softworks, and we all know Bethesda. They put out the Elder Scrolls and all of that, and it's not happening anymore. They're not going to have a sequel, and Prey 2 was announced how many years ago now? What, 2011 or 2008? I don't even know. It's been so long. The FPS shooter, the first-person shooter, was first announced in 2011 and thought to be in development at Human Head Studios, which had built the 2008 original. Then after a long period of silence since its announcement, the project was said to be in limbo. And then last year, 2013 August, Bethesda had moved the game to a new development team known as Arcane Austin. And then after that, not much was said about it, and Bethesda has basically... they've cancelled it. They have really cancelled it. It's no longer in development. That wasn't an easy decision, but it's one that won't surprise many folks, given that we haven't been talking about it. It wasn't up to quality standard, and we decided to cancel it. We felt like the game... we never felt that it got where it needed to be. We never saw a path to success if we finished it. So they just didn't believe in it. They just didn't think that it was good enough, I guess. I mean, it's funny because Bethesda... you'd think that they get it done. You'd think that having the rights to Prey and this game would have newer engine and some kind of new fucking approach to it. Maybe some innovations here and there, or maybe just an expanded game. Almost like a fucking God, like an FPS mixed with an Elder Scrolls type of game with more RPG style elements to it. I'm even taking a look at some of the screenshots on here, which is available on GameSpot.com. I mean, there's some not screenshots, but artwork. Their artwork on the project. Some of it is very early, and there's like alien characters on here, and it looks almost like like Blade Runner, you know, the city, a dark city, very futuristic design of the city, and you have like neon, very bright, I guess advertisements or posters in the sky, like very, very brightly lit. Almost like a futuristic Times Square kind of thing, with alien women on the poster, and yeah, I mean, it looks vastly different. I would say it's closer in visual presentation to something like a Mass Effect, and so it doesn't even really look like the original Prey, aside from, I mean, obviously the alien themes. The first Prey was more of a linear experience. It was very straightforward, and I mean, this game could have been something, you know. I mean, it could have been something interesting for the 8th generation consoles, if not maybe even the 7th generation with the PS3 and 360, if they had managed to finish it in time. It looks alright, you know. It looks like it could have been something unique, and that's the problem with brands like this. You know, you got Prey, which it did pretty good, the first game. You know, it sold over 1 million copies. The first Prey title was relatively well received critically, and it's just not... I mean, so much has fucking changed too in the past 8+ years of gaming. We've seen all these other successes. We've seen the Call of Duties come and go. Well, they're still around, but I mean, you know, it's kind of falling off a little bit, but we've seen it rise to peak levels of multi-million sales. Even something like Battlefield. You know, Battlefield has really become successful in its own right, and all these other shooters that have come and gone in the past 8 years. So the first Prey was like, okay, cool. You know, this is like a very early taster of a 7th generation 360 type of shooter. But then after that, I mean, the brand itself has basically fallen off, and nobody really remembers it too much, and it just kind of came and went. It was just notable for having a Native American character protagonist, which is very rare anyway in gaming. It's a very rare thing to have, and I thought it was kind of cool. Something different, and apparently even with a sequel, it's going to be a different character, Killian Samuels. It's going to focus on the U.S. Marshal who starts the game on a passenger flight which suddenly crashes onto the sphere, and then the crash itself is shown in the original Prey. At the end of a short battle, some aliens, he is knocked unconscious, and then the plot jumps forward several years. He became a bounty hunter, this Killian Samuels guy, on the alien world Exodus. He is aware of his profession and he's retained his skills. He's got no memory of what happened at the time that passed since his abduction. He initially believes himself to be the only human on Exodus until he runs into Tommy Tawodi, which is the protagonist of the original Prey, and he apparently met in a period he no longer remembers. Yeah, I mean, that does sound kind of interesting. It's a sci-fi, man. Sci-fi stuff. Pretty cool sci-fi. Supposedly, too, some people are speculating that maybe it's because, they don't want to fucking release it, or they have no more faith in it, simply because they don't think it's gonna make enough money. Simply because, well, it's been in development for so long, and maybe it's just not gonna sell that much, and it's costing more money than we think we could make money off of it, meaning the cost is more than the profit of the game. The expected profit of Prey 2, is not going to meet the initial investment that they, spent on the development of this game. So maybe that was a problem with the Prey 2 video game, and it sucks because there goes another potential game that could have been something interesting, in terms of the sci-fi genre. That's a little bit different than the typical military shooter, war type of FPS. And, this might be the actual indication that 90s FPS, meaning the first-person shooter style or names and brands of the FPS from the 90s, it really is dead. It really is fucking finished. People just don't want to continue anymore. Nobody gives a shit about Doom, nobody cares about Duke Nukem, and all these other titles from the 90s that used to be so fucking hot in the 90s, and Prey itself, the brand, has been around since the 90s and has been a project since the mid-90s, and so that's, some of these names are going back 19, 20 plus years ago, way back in the early 90s now, so a lot of these franchises are basically, you can expect them to go away. You can expect them to not continue anymore. Aside from the Wolfensteins, which ironically is still around, because, I think they released, a fucking new Wolfenstein game? Yeah, that one, but even so, did that sell as much as something like a Call of Duty? Not really. People are more interested in fucking military shooters now, so it's unfortunate, but that's just the way that, gaming trends happen to go. Thanks for watching The Review Space, the most underrated channel on YouTube. For more videos, check out youtube.com/The Review Space.